Welcome. You're listening or watching to the next episode of Whistlekick Martial Arts Radio. And today I'm joined by my good friends Stephen Watson and Nick Tabor. Stephen, how are you doing today?
Thank you. I'm feeling wonderful.
Excellent. And Nick, how about yourself?
Man, utterly fantastic. Thank you always for having me.
Excellent. So the three of us are here. We're going to discuss meditation for martial artists. But before we get into it, I want to make sure to let our listeners know about our new newsletter that we have started up. It is martial arts radio specific. You will get information on all the episodes that are coming out. There'll be some bloopers. Maybe you'll find out what we were talking about before we started recording. There's some really fun stuff that happened. But you can get to that newsletter by going to whistlekickmartialartsradio.com, and there is a button at the top that says subscribe. Not only will you get these emails, you'll also get a free book. I'm not going to tell you what the book is because that would defeat the purpose. It's a surprise. You won't know. You can also find out everything that Whistlekick does by going to whistlekick.com. Find out all of the events that we host throughout the country. Find out about our products that we sell, whether it's sparring gear or apparel. Find out about our training programs. All of that stuff you can find at whistlekick.com. So, guys, we are here to discuss meditation. I think we should just take a moment and just... And 1 hour later. Okay, that was good. That was good, guys.
1 hour later was good. I like that.
That was wonderful.
So, Sifu Stephen, you are someone that I know that meditates on a regular basis.
Yes.
And in fact, when I was chatting with you about, we should do an episode together, you were the one that brought up, let's do meditation.
Mm-hmm.
And meditation is something that is certainly not martial arts specific. Lots of, I would be willing to bet millions of people in the world that are not involved in martial arts meditate. But I do think, at least to the, I was going to say untrained, but that's not the word I meant. To the uninitiated martial artist, they often think meditation goes hand in hand in martial arts. And I think you would probably say it could, but it doesn't have to. So, I thought that would be a good place to start.
So I think that it suits martial arts, and it's likely to be promoted by every martial art, but we see less people do it than are expected to do it in their martial arts. And we see less of those people do it well or frequently or deeply than we would like. And for me, I wouldn't restrict it to martial arts. I'd say it's a humanity thing. Meditation benefits everything except for the villains in your movie. So apart from the villains, it benefits everything. And of course, we're in the martial arts world, and we can absolutely see the benefits of meditation in martial arts. Very often I observe, most of my students are teachers themselves, so very often I observe people providing an opportunity to meditate, but there isn't instruction. So there's really just sort of a stillness and a silence portion of a class in which the instructor uses the term meditation, around it, but there's no instruction, and it's really just an opportunity to promote stillness rather than internal observation or internal skill. And of course, that's because most of those instructors don't truly value it because they haven't truly done it. And so it's more of a paying lip service to something, which isn't without value, because at least people learn that meditation's important, and they learn to see other people value it and make time for it, but certainly not value it enough to let it bear fruit, I guess.
Can I question one thing? I would go so far as to say, and I could be wrong, listeners, let me know that I am, but I think it probably stems more from not that the instructors don't value it, it's that they don't know what it is. They don't know any better. I mean, I will speak for myself. My experience with meditation in a martial arts class is before class, the instructor would say in Japanese, mokuso, which is meditate, and we would
Mm-hmm.
sit still and quiet for a minute or so.
Mm-hmm.
And then at the end of class, the same thing. And, he would say that at the beginning of the class, our quote, and I'm putting this in air quotes for those watching, or for those just listening, the beginning before class was forgetting about everything that happened throughout the day, and like you're setting your mind up ready to learn. And at the end of class was you're focusing on what did you learn in class today, and you're contemplating that. But it was only about a minute. So that's my personal experience with meditation in a martial art
Mm-hmm.
class. And I think that's probably what you're thinking, or you're talking about. Was that correct?
Correct. Absolutely. That's exactly what I see. I don't know that it isn't that they don't value it or they haven't practiced it. I think those kind of go hand in hand. To the extent that you practice it, you value it,
Hmm.
but also to the extent you value it, you practice it. So
Hmm.
those teachers that we describe as, or as I've described as kind of mostly giving it lip service,
Hmm. Sure.
it's because they haven't practiced it and that's why they don't value it.
They
Or
don't know the difference.
maybe chicken and egg. Maybe it started not
Yeah. Hmm.
valuing it and therefore not practicing it, maybe the other way around. But in the other case, they need to go hand in hand.
Yeah. Nick, what's your experience been coming up through martial arts with meditation?
Oh man, yeah, I've had. There was an interesting one because it's similar to what you guys are saying, and my arts are Korean based. So at the very beginning of every class, it was Chumbi, Cheriat, Kunye, and Anjo for kneel. And when in kneel, you're expected to sit, with your hands, your belt in one of your hands and your hands on your knees when you're kneeling and reflect. Now, my sensei, my first sensei, he did it because his sensei did it.
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So it became okay, that's how we learned how to start the class. But over the years, as we started reading and started talking about it, it became with instruction, as you guys were saying to bounce off that. So the instruction, at least how I carried my students, Chumbi, Cheriat, Kunye, Anjo. And then when you're ready to do that, instead of, because we would grow up and we would just sit there, we're just waiting to hear the clap in order to open our eyes, bow, put our belts on, and go. The first one became sit still. Sit still just to do that, focus on breathing and let the day go. Whatever happened, if we were kids, it was let your parents, whatever your parents said or something. If you have a problem, homework, let that go. We're ready for this. And then at the end of the day, Chimbi Chiriat Kunye Anjo, and then wait. And then, as we're waiting for the clap, reflect, how proud are you today
Mm.
with what you did? And, if you're not proud, you got work to do the next time.
Mm.
And then,
Right, right.
hey, how are you? So then you do that, you think about it, reflect and clap. And then I started carrying it on and started working on it even with my own training, to sit for a few moments on my couch and still do the same reflection. What is the purpose of the day, or what is the purpose of the exercise I'm going to do, and how much gratitude do I have? And that's where I reflected here. And I think it's with meditation, there's no one way to do it. Meaning,
Agree.
there's no one way to do it as well. You can do that in the middle of a kata, as well. And, as you're doing it
Don't
again.
for the listener, don't try it the first time in the middle of sparring. Just
I
just
was just going to
please
ask.
continue your point.
Yeah, yeah, do not do it in sparring. If it's slow sparring, you might be able to get away with it, though.
Can I disagree with one thing?
Go ahead.
Yes.
If you're sparring me, you are allowed to meditate during sparring, but only.
That's right.
Yeah. But I think, as studies go on, like I've been involved with this for over 30 years now. And, as we do it, things change. But I think, and I don't know if you guys think the same thing, but meditation changes.
Hmm.
It's not just sit and sit still. It's, as you're practicing, maybe you get the bag up and you're practicing that roundhouse kick. and you're concentrating on the, on the foot that's on the ground. How is that pivot feeling? How is that when you hit that, you hit the pad with your other foot, how well is it doing?
Yeah.
And remembering those motions, and you get into that trance-like state. If you're warming up and you're running in place or doing sit-ups or something, are you concentrating on that motion of your spine or the legs and the breath? It can be done multiple ways. And maybe I took it a little too far here, but
No, it was helpful. Yeah.
yeah.
Can I add a thought here? Yeah.
Yeah, please.
So I'm imagining a page from a book. So maybe we want to picture like our student creed or our principles of our art or something like that, something important. School handbook. And you might imagine that over time you fill the margins a bit with a few other notes and, additives and a quote from somebody. And that's a pretty good document. But if we did that relentlessly and filled in every blank piece on that page, in time the page becomes unreadable and unuseful. The original page, but also your added notes, all of it. So there's a value to the space, to the emptiness, to the blank part of the page. And if we think of a meditation period as relatively blank, not to define meditation per se, but relatively blank as it in contrast to most of life, it's very easy for a teacher or a school over time to fill that space because they didn't really learn the meditation. They just know that there's a blank period where we all kneel at the beginning of class or at the end or before you spar or something like that. And without the sort of respect that comes from the deep practice, and this isn't to be insulting to somebody, it's just a matter of education, right? They may come to feel like, well, this is a good point for me to tell that story or to give that other advice or make an announcement about testing next week, or because that is an empty spot. But, and maybe a little bit of marginalia is fine, but by and large, the value is the emptiness, the stillness, the quiet. And this is a larger, a fractal version of what happens inside the meditator. As we begin to promote, preserve, and protect some emptiness, some stillness, some quiet, some blank page, some unwritten paper in the self, in the mind, it's very easy for us to crowd it out. Right. Our other things say, hey, there's an empty space for expression, and I've been burning to make this expression. And so part of our work is to work to preserve that. We need to promote it, and then we need to preserve it. It isn't that it has to be absolutely preserved, because the marginalia can be helpful or funny or instructive, but the general idea is to preserve what you have created, and that would happen in a class too. So we might, all of us having done this for decades, might recognize, boy, we used to sit quietly for 5 minutes, but now it's 3 and the teacher has announcements and people have questions. Or I reflected for a moment, but then I just really was just waiting until the teacher clapped their hands or rang the bell. And so I've crowded the space that I was meant to have empty, right? So anyway, this is a thought I had.
Yeah, yeah. And it's interesting you say that, because especially for some children, they have a hard time sitting still and being quiet and keeping themselves regulated. And I certainly know instructors that have used that time for that everybody basically sit still and be quiet so that I can talk about what needs to get done.
Sure.
Like, don't, like you mentioned, testing is next week. Don't forget to bring this,
Yep.
whatever. And you're right. It does kind of defeat the purpose of what that was intended for.
Right.
That's not to say that those announcements are not important.
Of course they are. Yeah.
Absolutely. But I hadn't thought of it that way. That's interesting. Yeah.
It's interesting because those announcements are important, and the story is, and the Q&A, and the added thought besides what I said during class, the extra thing or the homework I wanted to, those are important, but create a time and place for that. the bulletin board, the newsletter, the announcement period right after we all line up before we take our belts off or something. Create a period for that and promote and protect and preserve that for its own purpose, whatever you call that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Sort of non-curriculum talk period, which that's awkward, but whatever it is. Um, but it's I was remember talking to a student of mine this week who is uh, she works with ESL students, and she was talking about how the administrators keep pulling her students away because of the fire drill, and now they have to make up a test, and because there's a vacation coming up, and they have to go do this other event, and there's a lecture, and they want to draw, and she was saying how they keep pulling her out of ESL because that's seen as not as important as the core stuff.
Yep. Yep.
And in the same way, you would expect a martial arts teacher to think, well, the form stuff and the sparring and the stretching, that's important. And out of tradition, I do a little meditation, and I also, talk up what's coming up on the school calendar. But definitely the important things are the sparring, the stretching, and the forms,
Mm-hmm.
or whatever, the bunkai, whatever it
Yep.
might be.
Yep.
And I think, if this stuff really is important, it would be nice to see it. It would be nice to see it as uh, deeply valued and
Mm-hmm.
argued for as anything else. That doesn't mean it has to take up as much time. If you're going to a judo class, we would expect a whole bunch of that class time to be doing physical judo stuff.
Sure.
Fair
Sure.
enough.
Right.
So one of the ways that I recommend people start meditation in a martial arts environment, and sometimes they don't have the ability or the confidence to kind of tinker with the curriculum. They've only been teaching for a few years, or they're not the head teacher, but they
Mm.
want to include it, and they might start a club or a reading book club or something like that. I'll say, look, do you guys bow? Or yeah, like 60% of our class is bowing. Like bowing is constantly happening. Or we bow when we start and we bow when we end. And I said, well, make that your meditation. Well, that's not very long. I said, well, we were talking about good meditation. Nobody said long.
Mm-hmm.
We're just interested in good. I said, well, just consider a bit how many profoundly, like, let's say spiritual, to think of a grand word, how many profoundly spiritual bows have you witnessed or been a part of? Oh, dude, like so few.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Like, how many have I done and seen and been a part? Oh, zillions. But how many were like the ones in the movies, the ones that we aspire to, like
Mm.
fully present, coordinated with the breath, not losing sight of the person, very mindful, very like pure, absolutely sincere,
Mm.
very few.
Mm. Mm.
If I did all those things during a bow, would it take longer? Sure, maybe a few seconds longer. So instead of a 2.5 second bow, you have a 4 second bow. I don't think your teacher's going to complain that the class rhythm is
Yeah.
obstructed
Yeah. Yeah.
or denied. So you know the challenge then is, can you make the next bow, maybe every bow at some point, sincere, mindful,
Mm.
pure? Can it have this crystal clarity that this is the only thing this human being is doing, and I'm fully aware of the human being or beings that I'm bowing to, right? I'm
Yeah. Yeah.
that
Yeah.
that's profound. And then you have a meditation practice and you didn't light one candle.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's great.
And the thing that I like about that is I think of it like, okay, in my previous school, we bowed all the time. We did, at the beginning of class, we bowed to the instructor, like we opened class with a bow, and we did the same thing at the end. But every time you worked with a partner, you bowed, right? It was
Hmm.
like, acknowledging, like, I appreciate, what you're giving your body to me to use as a partner, like,
Right.
um, and I liken it to, when I say the word hi to someone, like, if I saw you on the street, Nick, hey, oh, hey, how's it going? That's very different from hello, how are you today, right? It's the same thing. It means the same thing,
Right.
and I'm almost in my head envisioning the beginning of and ending of class is hello, how are you doing today? As opposed to in the middle of class, hey, what's going on? Let's practice, like those two things can be separate, but I think there has to be some intent ahead of time, right? It has to be mindful. You have to know that that's what you're doing. Nick, what are your thoughts?
I agree a lot of it, and I mean, where my thing is, I teach a lot of people with disabilities.
Mhm.
And that's a big niche for me. And one of the things we do when we do anything, like I have a student right now who's autistic, and I have to explain the point of everything when I introduce anything. At least because he's very new, so that's something that helps. But I think meditation itself also, when you guys are talking about the purpose, there are some things that we can do. We do this because our sensei did it, or we do this because we're really trying to teach a life skill. Because we have conversations with somebody, and oftentimes, and I did this when I used to teach with sales, you're speaking to somebody, and they're talking to you, but then you're thinking about what you're going to say next.
Yeah,
You're
your mind is not present.
Exactly. You're truthfully not really registering what they're saying. You're thinking about what you're going to say, and that happens with us quite often.
Sure.
That if somebody does say something and we drill something in our heads because of a kid to ask a question that's really not appropriate, we want to make sure we have that answer ready to go instead of genuinely listening and knowing what's happening. So when I introduce something, and also like when I started doing this and really pushing the point, was at the peak of the pandemic, and I had 90% of my students on Zoom. And everything going on, we have our cell phones feeding us data every day at any moment. We have noise from the outside. We have everything coming at us. I talked to my students. I said, when is the last time you really truthfully had a clear head? And they're like, I don't really know. I don't know. When is the last time you truthfully did it? And from the martial arts perspective, when we have an attack on us, albeit a physical one, or somebody uses their words, or an intrusive thought comes into our minds, we have to be able to have that clear head in order to respond to it, not necessarily in the way we drilled it. So, but like we have to be able to respond to it as our right self. So like a point on that, like when we do that meditation, we're at our clear part where we got that Zen mentality. Okay, we're focusing on it, as you guys said. We do the bow. We don't do a bow just because we're told to do a bow. We do a bow because we're sincere.
With intention.
With intention, yes, exactly. So when somebody throws a strike at us, it might be that same strike we learned in the dojo all the time, but if it's somebody out in the street, you might have an entirely different strike come at you. I mean, oh, that's not what I learned. Oh my gosh, and then you're thrown off. But if you're constant and practice that meditation and have it in life, that when you're at that Zen focus, okay, you have a punch come at you that's a little bit lopsided. Okay, I know what to do. It's not high block and punch. It's okay, I'll move out of the way on this one, and then you just naturally react. And therefore you're a better prepared martial artist. If somebody throws words at you, okay, that's not personal. That's them. Same as you would an attack, a physical attack. And then, as you get older, and especially when we teach people not just for kicks and punches. We teach people for multiple situations. And all that.
So we talked about meditation and how we have often seen it in a martial arts school. Sifu, Stephen, you talked about, how you can make it a little more intentional with your bows. What would be the next step? Like if, I'm at a school and, I've talked to my students about, let's make this beginning and before and after class, like a little more intentional. Maybe we do a minute or two of silence before class. But what's the next step? How can we take this maybe even out of the dojo into our own lives to gain benefit from it?
Well, get a teacher.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Don't just figure it out yourself. Meditation is primarily a practice of the mind. The mind is very good at thinking it knows all about things, especially the mind. One of my teachers said, you can't think your way out of a prison made of thoughts.
Interesting. Can you say that again? Say that
You
again.
can't think your way out of a prison made of thoughts.
Mm.
And as soon as you say that, everybody goes, uh-huh, and then they think that they can.
Yeah.
And
I mean, I
in
could.
in the same way people will nod and say meditation sounds good, I'll just sit quietly, hold some mudra, and breathe, and that must be it. And having a teacher is, not surprisingly, the key to all of this stuff. It doesn't mean that you have to climb a mountain in India and give up your belongings and meditate for 2 hours a day with a perfect posture. As I suggested, it could be the duration of a bow. I was one of my own practices is to redefine on a daily basis the arts that I practice. And the definition that I wrote for meditation, I think yesterday, was that it's a conscious selection of the depth, the reach, the breadth, the steadiness, the direction, and the quality of your attention. So to answer your question, how would we take the first baby steps? Is
Sure.
just pick one of those things. The ones I said were depth, reach, breadth, steadiness, direction, and quality. And just say, let me improve the quality of my attention
One of the things.
for, 3 breath cycles until the timer dings 1 minute. Nobody said anything about posture or mudra. Nobody said about an esoteric breathing methodology. Nobody said you have to face the Buddha poster in your bedroom. Just maybe for a few breaths, consciously choose the reach of your awareness. Nobody even said what that attention was on. It could be on a grand thing like world peace, and it could be just on that folded white napkin on the table. Which isn't particularly, there it is, which isn't particularly sacred, but it works, right? So that would be my thought on that. Meditation is not a tuning out; it's a tuning in. So very often people think that meditation is about stopping all the clutter and the clatter and the chattering and the chaos. It's really just paying attention. You'll notice that, when your kids are in the house and everybody's got their excitement and goings on, and then they all head out to, nobody invited you to anything. They all went off to their day. And really, like the moment they leave, you can hear the traffic outside.
Yeah. Yep.
And the traffic was there all along, but you weren't tuned into it. You were tuned into the kids.
Yep.
And in the same situation, tuning into your attention internally, we end up not being slaves to and fighting with all the chatter. That's not the same as dissolving the chatter or defending the chatter or dispelling the chatter. It's really just tuning in. So it's like a proactive approach rather than a reactive approach.
Yeah. Nick, how does that feel to you?
I absolutely completely agree with
Yeah.
Steve, and I want to add just one thing to it, and it's what
Thank you.
I teach my students as well as others that come along and ask me about it, is to try it at different times of the day and to see what time of day works for you. If it's best to do it, for a few moments at the end of the day when you're lying in bed trying to think of, how am I going to get to sleep instead of thinking, okay, how many hours can I get of sleep tonight? Because they're here or using your phone. or
Mm-hmm.
first thing in a day when you're eating breakfast, for example. And also expect not to be good at it right away.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
good point.
there's a lot of things that people do, and like going back to the pandemic, when it was peak pandemic, when everybody was in lockdown and we couldn't see anybody for a little while, a lot of people picked up hobbies. And like even when you have like people have New Year's resolutions, another story, another day, they give them up right away because it wasn't that good. Okay, I'm not that great at it, I'm just going to go over here. Expect not to be good, and to
Mm,
the point also, have a teacher or somebody to ask,
Mm-hmm.
not a YouTuber or someone. Well, we're on YouTube right now, but not a YouTube video, but to go to somebody and say, okay, what do you think? That's a very important part of it.
Yeah.
That's very,
The first thing that you learn in bakery
yeah,
school is
yeah,
if you keep opening the oven,
yeah. It's not.
right, the muffins aren't going to cook.
Mhm.
And in terms of meditation, wait,
Yeah,
I'm distracted. Wait, I can smell it. What was I doing? Okay, hang on.
yeah,
Uh, in terms of meditation, the every time that you ask, "Is this working? What are the benefits?" You've opened the oven.
yeah, yeah,
right.
It kind of resets it and throws it. So I like to think of nurturing a meditation practice the same way that you think of planting a tree.
mm,
If you're planting a tree, it's for tomorrow. It's not for today.
yeah,
Right.
If you plant lettuce or tomatoes, you can be reasonably sure you'll enjoy them. But if you plant a tree, it's for your grandchildren. And if you plant a meditation practice, it's not for you today. It's for you in 10 years, 20 years, 5 years, whatever, and your children and your family.
yeah.
Yeah.
So the takeaway that I'm getting from this is that meditation is a skill.
Mhm.
Yes.
Right? It's not something that people just inherently know how to do. Sitting quietly, not talking, is not meditation. Now, it can be, but there's more to it than that, which is why having someone to help guide you through this is good.
Yes.
Now, the last kind of angle tree branch I want to go off in this discussion is why? Why should we as martial artists meditate? I've been I'm I've been teaching karate for 35 years and I don't need to meditate. Like, let's talk a little bit about the benefits of doing it. Which obviously I suspect the benefits will be different for lots of for lots of different people, but if we can keep it somewhat general, let's talk about that a little bit.
I s- Everybody spends their entire life constructing a story of themselves and then selling that story to everybody they meet.
Mm-hmm.
Meditation allows you to do the research so that you can present a nonfiction version of yourself.
Mm.
I can actually see who I am, right? Then there's still the issue of, do I want to lie about it and present another version? I would argue less and less likely the more you meditate. But either way, I'm doing the research. I'm figuring out what this is to be human and what it is to be human now at this age, what it is to be human given my circumstances today, my health today, my outlook today, my education today. So to me, it's a continual returning to the source, which is self. Um, as much as I want to think the source is other than self, whether that's religious or spiritual or whatever it might be, uh, the only reality I wake up with every day is me. And the rest of it is stuff I remember. To return to me is not to remember, it's
Mm-hmm.
to return. To return to me is not to construct or reconstruct, it's to revisit reality.
Mm. Nick, anything to add?
You're absolutely right. It's how often do we spend time reacting to everything around us, and then we truthfully don't know who we are at the end. And just a very brief story on that, just to add to it, like, I was a sales teacher for a while, and I wanted this job when I was 20, and then I woke up I'm at my desk just doing my thing, and suddenly I'm like, why am I here? What do I do? And what do we do? And then when we go in internally and we start to focus on this is why we should do it, is we know who we are. And when we present an honest and true version of ourselves, the better the universe is going to give to us with who we are. And then there's the yin and yang version, is that where the yin, the yang comes back to us.
I want to give you like a slight pushback on that. The more honest I am about who I am, I think you were saying that the better the universe will give back to us, or the more it will give us. I don't agree with that, although it might be true, particularly in particular circumstances. I would say that the universe is great and amazing and magical and mythical and impossible and how lucky. So all I need for the equation is, can't I give my best to it? Whether or not it gives me more or better because I gave my best, I don't know, and I don't care. What I care about is my contribution to it, and it can be more authentic, more sincere, more pure, more relevant if I'm coming from a meditative, informed place.
Yeah. Okay. I get that.
Yeah.
Is there anything that we have missed out on discussing? Is there anything else we want to add before we close up?
I just want to quote myself because it can't be said better. Uh, my translation or my definition of meditation is that meditation is where the illness and the medicine grow side by side in the very same garden.
One more time.
Meditation is where the illness and the medicine grow side by side in the very same garden.
I like that.
So it's sort of like martial arts, right? I'm learning this violent and dangerous thing. Is it going to be for good or evil, right? That's the question. And meditation is me coming in here, sharpening these skills. But these are the very same skills, or the same skill, it's the same toolbox anyway, that can lead to downfall. So I think it's important to recognize that. As maybe a bit of a caution. And that's one of the reasons having a teacher can be helpful to so that there's not misuse where we were looking for healthful use.
Anything to add, Nick, at the very end here before we close out?
I would say, like any process, just to quote myself, because I have the opportunity now. Like any process, you climb the stairs one step at a time. Success is not instant. So as you start to learn it, as I said, you might not be great at it right away, but little bits at a time always help.
Awesome.
Nice.
And start small. So I want to be able to quote myself.
Yes.
So I would say start small. Those that were really paying attention notice I just said start small. I just want to be able to quote myself. I would
like
say
it.
that the
and remember that Nick's fantabulous beard was grown after just one meditation session. So there are benefits.
That's funny. But, in all seriousness, this, if people listening, this doesn't have to be, I'm going to get into meditation. I need to find an hour a day that I can make this happen. No, start small. It doesn't have to, that meditation is different for everyone. And the way we do it can be different. I think, even if it's just in your martial arts school, making it purposeful, having it have an intention, and that intention has to be vocalized to your students. They have to know what it is you're expecting them to do, right?
Nice. Yeah.
And I think that's important, but start small. It doesn't have to be big. So thank you guys for joining me on this journey. I really, really appreciate it. Oh, Sifu's holding his phone
up a QR code just in case to find me.
Oh, there it goes. There we go. Okay, great. Someday Farm Guided Meditation Podcast. There you go. Thank you guys so much for being here. For the people listening at home, what did you think of this episode? Was this, slightly different topic we haven't talked about a lot? We appreciate hearing from your getting listeners to discuss what they liked and what they thought of the podcast. So please do so either through our YouTube page or on our Facebook group, which is Martial Arts Radio. Don't forget that if you want to help support this show and everything that Whistlekick does, you can go to whistlekick.com/Patreon. Sorry, patreon.com/Whistlekick. Let me try that again.
That's it.
To help make sure that this show happens each and every week, twice a week. Whistlekick.com to purchase apparel, sparring gear, training programs, books. Use the code podcast15. You can save yourself a little bit of money. And whistlekickmartialartsradio.com for every episode we've done. We're well over 1,000 episodes at this point. And they're all listed there for free. And then you can go to the very top where it says subscribe and subscribe to our brand new Whistlekick Martial Arts Radio only newsletter, where you'll get a free book and some behind the scenes stuff eventually. We haven't yet rolled that out, but I'm working on it, so stay tuned.
And put start small in the comments so we know you listen this far.
Oh, good call.
Start small.
Quote yourself too. Yeah.
What's that?
And quote yourself.
Quote yourself.
Yeah, quote yourself. Yeah.
That's right. So thank you so much, guys. Until next time, train hard, smile, and have a great day.